In this lesson, we'll talk about saving everything down to polygon objects and naming and just organizing our scene. So let's go back in here to our completed ship. I've added a couple of things, and they're just these kind of pads on the steps. I just wanted to do that. They're just planes with extruded up geometry, and I've shaped them a little bit. I've also added a couple on the bottom here for kind of grip. If you want to add those, you can certainly do that. So we've gone through the process of building this guy using Cinema 4D's hierarchy-based workflow, which is a really nice way to work. You can go in and we looked at how we can use splines to create some geometry very quickly and still have the ability to go back and edit that. So a lot of this geometry still is in spline form with generators creating the actual geometry. So once we move forward though, in our case, we want to actually save everything down to a polygon object. So it's more portable. When we start to do our rigging, it's more, we can have a little bit more control over it. And so we have all of these primitives and then all these generators, and we want to start to save those down. And anything that is smooth with the hyperNURBS, we'll go ahead and save as the low resolution, and then we can always add a hyperNURBS onto that after. So basically we want to get rid of all the generators except for the hyperNURBS. So in some cases that'll be pretty straightforward. So let's see. So up here we've got our fins, and the fins are being created by this symmetry. So we've got one polygon object underneath a symmetry generator. So in order to create both of these, because if I turn this off, we really only have one object, all I have to do is right click. And if you want to keep the original, you can say current state to object. I'm going to go ahead and say make editable. That's going to create a null with this geometry underneath it. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this, and I'm actually going to rename this symmetry null, and we'll just call this something like ship capsule or pod, something like that. And we can go ahead and, if you want to, drag it up to the top. And one of the things that I like to do is once I have something done as far as, you know, baked down or organized, I can go ahead and turn it off, turn off the visibility so I know what I've done. So I'm going to go ahead and control click on the little stoplight, and so now that's invisible, so I know that I don't have to do that anymore. Okay, so here we have this piece. Okay, we can start to organize things, so we can start to select all of our different objects. Okay, start to organize those. So if we want to group those together, let's group objects. We'll call this landing gear. Okay, we have another symmetry, and this one has the pistons. And so let's go ahead now and bake this down. So make that editable. And now we've got these two pistons. Now right now you can see how they are separated, but they're not necessarily separated in the way that we might want. So we've got the two bottom pieces and the two top pieces. Okay, so if we want to reorganize this, we can go ahead and select those polygons, and let's split. So there we've got that one, and this one we'll go ahead and delete along with the straight points there. Okay, so we've got now two pieces of that geometry, and we can do the same thing down here. Okay, so you can split things apart. We've got objects that are being generated here. So we take a look at this. Here is a loft NURBS being generated by two splines. Okay, so what we can do is right click on this, again, make editable. Now in this case, and this is going to happen with these generators that are being created from splines, we have the main object. Okay, we have the rounding and the caps. Okay, so again, we kind of looked at this earlier. I want to do the same thing. I want to take all these pieces. Okay, we can take them all and connect them, and just to make sure that all of the points are welded together, we can go ahead and use connect. Okay, let's go ahead now, make that editable. Turn this off. You can see that we have some issues with the shading. You see all these triangles as well? These are actually tags, which we'll talk about in the next section, but they're basically selection tags so that I could select different parts of the model here. There's the rounding. Okay, we can go into our Phong tag and we can start to play with this value here to get something that looks a little bit more like what we want. Okay, but now that's just a polygon object. Now we can drop it into our, there's our landing gear. Drop it into our landing gear and name it something appropriate. So gear miscellaneous A, if it's not that important to what it's named. Okay, and you just want to do that same thing with all of these other pieces. Okay, so again, if you have something that is made by symmetry, you can go ahead and bake that down. Okay, you might want to come in, for instance, here we have the cloner for the fan. If we right click on the cloner and say make that editable, it's going to take that and it's going to create all of these cubes. If we want to leave them all separate, we can, or we can go ahead, make those editable, we can connect them and delete. And so now we have one single object. Take that object, go ahead and center our axis so that we can still rotate it around. So now instead of a cloner, we have one polygon object, and we can just call this fan blades. Okay, and bake that down. Same thing here with our circles. You want to bake it down. And keep in mind, you're going to have those rounding and caps to deal with. Okay, so you just want to take some time, and this is going to take a little bit of time if you go through that entire process of baking this down. Let's see what one that's done looks like, because it's going to be really tedious to go through, show this entire thing. So let's go ahead and open this up. So you can see this is a slightly different version. In this one, the fan, we've made the fan a little bit bigger, and some of the shapes are just slightly different, but all of the pieces are there. Okay, and so whatever yours looks like, you can go with what you have, or you can take this one from here. But let's take a look at the hierarchy. So right now, we've just got one null at the top. If we open that up, you can see we've got the pod, and if I turn off that, you can see what's involved in the pod. So just organizing things that way, and also the wings. Okay, so if we jump down under the pod, I've added a gas cap back here. We've got the headlights parented under a null. But you can see everything is a polygon. Okay, we've got all of that baked down. Thrust, the only generators I have are hypernerbs, which are smoothing the different shapes. And that just helps us to keep a low resolution object while still being able to see it very smooth. Okay, the interior, everything is a polygon. The only generators you see are those hypernerbs. Okay, the wing pivot, the landing gear, again, hypernerbs, the mechanics, the gears, okay, the antenna, okay, and then the wing, the fans, separated. Okay, so take some time and take a look at this hierarchy if you want to, just to see how it's broken up. Okay, and in the struts, I basically separated mine into the pod and the wings. You don't have to, but I'm assuming that this whole piece is going to be able to move together and that the pod needs to be able to move on its own. And so that's how I've kind of set mine up. But you can set yours up in whatever way you want. Okay, so take some time and bake everything down into polygons. And if you want to keep, you can always save out a version, keep that version with all the generators and everything in it, just in case you need to go back and get something out of there. If during the conversion process something gets damaged, or you lose something, then you can always go back in and re-reference that in. Okay, so let's go ahead from here and import some geometry. So let's say we've got multiple scenes with objects in them. How can we transfer those objects to different scenes? So we'll go ahead and take a look at that in the next lesson.